I've always suspected that my brother's relationship to animals is probably much more natural than mine. It's a total complexity to me. The link with my brother's occupation of hunting. I mean, we were in his backyard, and he was showing me a new shotgun he had. And I'm looking at it, and out of the corner of my eye, I see a bird flying overhead. And I see this flash of activity and shells coming out of his pocket, and I hear the shotgun getting loaded. I hear an explosion, and I see the bird drop dead out of the sky. And I'm caught in what in Zen is known as a double bind, that your brain becomes a tuning fork that vibrates equally at the same frequency, and that you can't jump to one thought or the other. You stay stuck in two thoughts. So half of my brain is thinking, that's the most amazing shot I have ever seen. And the other vibration is, why would you kill that thing? What's happened is I've been dragging out stuff I haven't looked at for a long time, and have been made quite aware once again that this double bind that I seem to live in continuously goes on. I thought I would just track a commercial job. This is Gary Gilmore. He's the topic of Norman Mailer's book, The Executioner Song. He killed people in Utah. They sentenced him to death. They didn't kill him. He took the state to court and said, you promised to kill me, you didn't kill me. He won the case, and they killed him. All right. So Playboy magazine installed Mailer's book in 3 parts, and they asked me to illustrate it. So this is the reference they sent me. This is Gary Gilmore in the warden's office. This is a photograph after the execution. This is real down-home stuff, folks. That's a chair out of the warden's office. The warden's wife made that hood, that black shape in the back they put over his head. If you look at the sandbags, they were afraid that the firing squad bullets would ricochet. There was supposed to be 4 photographers. There were 50. I called Playboy back and said, I cannot make a piece of art stronger than the madness in this photograph. Run the photograph. And they said, but it's not in color. So, I don't know what you do when you make a picture. My feeling about this stuff is if I don't believe my pictures, you're not going to believe them either. So I get a little obsessive about this. I go out and buy the shirt that he was shot in. I make a hood, and my wife takes Polaroids of me. And this is the final picture. At the last minute, a priest pinned the white piece of paper over his heart. The only movement he made was his right hand came up. They're like old friends to me. Are they going to be able to frame all of them in 2 days?
2 days. It's lovely. 先请他那边展厅看一下，因为那边一个那样布置好不好？
Would you please go to the next door?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Wow. Filled up 2 rooms with monkeys.
你跟他讲说这样有几
这样you want to paint the monkey's face like a Chinese?不 a
Like
human
a
being.
human,
Human being.
I think
Different.
part of the fun for me, right, to look at all these different faces,
Yeah.
is I find resemblances, a kind of likeness to people I know. Right? In other words, some monkeys look like my uncle. Some monkeys look like my mother. Some monkeys look like. But see, this is a monkey you don't want to meet, right?
Oh.
Right? Because you look at them, but they look at
How long you paint monkeys?
I don't know what the Chinese word, qi, I see auras around people. I see color around people.
You draw or you paint them?
No, I see it. Right?
You can
and
see?
And then I
它可以-
paint it, right?
他可以看到人身上的光环，然后他画那个东西。
What is the Chinese word for that?
光环，
Guang Guang?
光环。Yes.
Okay.
Rays of lights.
Like from
yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Huh? Before the monkeys, I painted human beings with light.
哦，他
Right?
他是
And
一
then
种
I started painting the monkey with the light. Much of it comes from China, right? The idea that the monkey is a sacred animal. So when you look at these monkeys, this is their aura. Your aura is blue.
绿色的什么
blue，但你的光环是绿色、蓝色的。
？Wine.
No, that's just the color you have.
它
Right?
可以看得见你身上。And mine.
Hers is blue but with some green. When I started thinking about doing some monkey sculpture things, I started taking mold classes and getting advice from sculpture friends. But the steps involved were so complicated that by the time I got to it, it was like I was tired of doing it. So one afternoon I had 20 kids from the UN school in here. And the deal was that they could visit the studio if they drew a monkey for me. And one of the kids came in carrying a little bag of this stuff, which is called celluclay, and it's basically a kid thing. It's a paper mache craft thing. And she sat here and made a little monkey, which I tried to swindle out of her, but she wouldn't give it to me. But watching her work it seemed so simple that I went out and bought this stuff, and so all of the monkey sculpture stuff in there is made actually out of this stuff, which is a simple paper mache. There's something about the immediacy of this material that seems to suit my nervous system, which doesn't work well when there are lots of technical procedures. You can't get heavy detail in it, which is kind of nice. It's although you can sand it and drill it, but so it's nice. You get a second hit at it. The body. Part of what making the sculpture does is it actually allows me an object that I can put real light on. So when I actually get into the paint, and I'm trying to paint light in the paint anyway, it seems to come more naturally. I seem to have a better understanding of the form by simply having to mold it with my hand. And then this thing got out of hand. Got totally obsessed. This is a monoprint, which I guess means you get one print. I'm not a printmaker, so I'm not really interested in the technical process of this, except that, again, it has to do with, it's a medium that, in terms of me and speed, is much like the sculpture. It's you can't fool around a lot with monoprints. You kind of pull light out of a dark ground, and so the initial idea is simply to ink up the plate so that, and you can mix a black. I mean, this is a pure black I'm using, but you can mix browns into it. In a print shop, people work with etching inks. I just find that oil paint right out of the tube without mixing any linseed oil or anything works better for me because it's softer, it's easier to pull it off the glass. You'll see immediately that this is about light and dark. And so if you're not thinking in terms of a light source, you get lost in here very quickly. I mean, it amuses me that this is the way God did it. First there was dark, and then there was light. But it also forces you into working the whole image at the same time. I mean, you can't get stuck in a corner somewhere. You've got to keep working the whole. And this is basically the process I paint with. These are basically monoprints that I've worked on top of. I mean, you can still see the monoprint underneath the tones and painting. It's a very kind of bastardized process of the traditional underpainting technique that Velázquez and Rembrandt and a lot of painters did, which is work out the entire painting in one color. All your light sources and establish all the form and then come back to it and begin to add color and glazes and a piece this small probably doesn't even need an armature, but just to give it a little support. Once I build something, then I put the light on it and move the light around it, and I think your memory retains that information in terms of form and shape. What I'm doing is mentally creating a light source that comes from here, and that's giving me my whitest whites in here. It's giving me this white, giving me a highlight on the forehead. The forehead's shaped like that, so I'm picking up a light up in here, and as we move out of the light, we're basically moving into the shadow. And part of the idea of these monkeys was I didn't want to get them so distinctly formed that you would lose the sense that maybe it was a rock, like the Zen rock garden. It's probably sacrilegious to do this, but I'm not a Buddhist, so.
I'm art director of the book review of the Times. Prior to that, I was art director for a few years of the op-ed page. I've been art director of the book review now for about 25 years. It was 68. I was 17 at the time. Started as art director of Screw. Good thing I'm still liberal. I'm looking for a Marshall cover. Marshall was not what you would call your erotic artist. This cover prompted a lot of response, such as, "Where are the tits and ass?" Or, "Where are the babes? And what's that thing that's coming out where the penis used to be?"
Grinning buttocks and this weird figure and this phallic figure here. This is 60s, huh? 60s, amazing. They're not necessarily our fantasies. They're not our yearnings. They're what is within us. They're not. It's not something that we want. It's something that we are. It is the essential us and the usness of us. I see this as maybe as the way we are, as all sex is. It's located in a very specific, secret part of the brain, and that this is very, very worrying indeed.
I did this when I was 4 or 5. My mother actually kept my artwork early on. Later on, she said, "I hate your artwork. Don't ever send me a painting. I don't want your paintings in my house. Your paintings are ugly, and I think it's my fault." You understand? Do any of you have mothers who think your work is their fault? No, just me? This is a drawing I did of a guy cutting wood. My mother had written on the back what I said they were, right? The point of all of us is that at this point in our life, we are not trying to make art. We are trying to make images that connect us to the rest of the world. The problem is we don't have much to go with. We have little globs. That glob stands in for saw teeth. It also stands in for feet and head and hands and whatever. Then we start to hit things where we actually want to talk about them in pictures. This is a little kid's drawing who drew himself. Then the kid drew his mother. Then the kid drew his father. And then the kid drew his sister. Look at the struggle in that right hand, all right? The right hand is no longer a glob. I mean, there is real struggle trying to draw those fingers because the fingers are now really important. I mean, those are the things that are going to get it, right? The teeth suddenly became very important as diagonals. They got to bite you, right? Then we start to draw eyelashes and moles and fingernails. What I love about this drawing is that they got to the bottom of the page and realized that the figure was not going to fit, and did the absolute logical thing of picking up the shoes and throwing them back into the drawing, right? In the late 60s, most of you weren't even born, but magazines became a curious media event. The photojournalism was stuck in between the advertising, and I began to realize that when I went through a magazine, I was looking at photographs, horrific photographs, in the same way I was looking at Ivory soap ads. I'd say, oh yeah, there's an ad for makeup. Oh yeah, there's somebody in Vietnam. So at any rate, I began to do drawings. And they are meant to be, in my brain, photographs. I wanted them to be cropped like photographs. I put gray spray paint in the back to tone them like photographs. And the drawing was simply meant to be a comment on the endless documentation of violence. There will never be another event in the world that is not documented. Somebody will always be there with a camera. So the series became violence we do to each other, violence we do to ourselves, and violence we do to the environment. It's a photographic frame. Everybody in the frame gets a gun. Anything that comes into the frame dies. So this is my favorite animal drawing. It's Durer's drawing of a hare. And I thought, yeah, they'd kill it. That book of drawings I did about violence defined me in terms of the work I get. What I didn't understand is that this became my portfolio. When I finished the series, my brother wrote me a 12-page letter of critiques about my handgun drawings. The Smith & Wesson on page 4 is very good. The pump action on the 12-gauge, page 20, is off, right? So he liked this drawing because I drew his holster correctly. Jamestown, New York, Lilydale. This is actually the road when it was a 2-lane highway that we came down for my interview at Pratt. It took 13 hours to drive to Brooklyn. I'd never heard of Pratt, and I really didn't want to go to Brooklyn. I get a letter on a Wednesday saying my appointment with the dean of Pratt was Thursday morning at 9 a.m. So I get a couple of guys and drove all night. I hadn't shaven and I was all wrinkled, whatever. And the dean of Pratt said, any young man dedicated enough to his career and art and Pratt Institute deserves to be here. You're accepted. And the dean, the assistant dean was sitting off to the side looking at my bad transcript from high school saying, well, but you know, he said, it doesn't matter. This young man drove all night to get here, right? And it was my first inkling that I was going to be an art whore for the rest of my life. But this is actually the road that I was driving late one night. I saw a deer on the side of the road. Some trailer rig had run over its back haunch and broken both the back leg. It was kind of jerking, and I stopped, and it was one of those strange moments that he couldn't get up. He was in pain. And I kept trying to approach him, and he kept getting more spooked. That's it, huh?
That's it. That was just a,
It's a single shot?
no, I had 5,
Oh, really?
4 or 5. I only put 2 or 3 at a time in there. It's open. You can look all across the.
Nice toy, Bruce.
This is what I put in there.
No, that's the show.
So, 103 grain Hornady bullets, the 50 grains of 748 Winchester powder, all hand loaded.
But the last time I saw you, you just got a deer with your 357 Magnum.
No, 44.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, I had a 44. I got 2 of them.
You can hunt with a pistol?
Yeah.
Really?
Up here.
So this is your life in shooting, right?
Yeah.
125 straight.
No, I don't like to brag.
You were a lot younger, Bruce.
It looks that way, doesn't it?
I figured you'd be in jail, man, by the time you were 20 years old.
Yeah, I know it.
You almost shot me once. You remember that?
Yeah. You're probably
Son
bad.
of a bitch, I can't. You remember? We were in high school, right? And the deal was whoever got in first had to leave the door open. You got in early, locked the door. I come home, door is locked. I break in through the cellar. I come up into the kitchen, and I feel a 45 on the side of my head. I hear the hammer click, right? And you say, I'm going to kill you. And I don't think you knew who it was. But you've never been tempted to shoot anybody, huh?
No, I'm not that bad. Only you.
My brother and I used to hide pornography in places you would need screwdrivers to find. Do you understand? I mean, way in my mother always found it, right? I knew she was in there when we left for school with a flashlight. And my brother and I slept in the same bed, in the same room. So in the morning, we'd come down, and there'd be some piece of pornography sitting on the dining room table. And my mother would say, one of you owns that piece of filth out there. Right? And my brother would look at me and say, you know what she's talking about? And I'd say, not a clue, right? So years later, I'm home. I'm 24. I'm not a kid. I'm home for the first time in many years. And my mother says, I was cleaning your room, and I found a story you wrote. And there's a word in it I want you to take out. And I said, what word, Mother? And she said, I have never said that word. Your last name is the same as my last name. And I don't want my name connected to that word. Now go upstairs and tell Emma. Okay, we argue with Emma. A month goes by. I've forgotten all about it. 5 o'clock in the morning, at the breakfast table, my father is there, I'm there, and my mother is cooking. My mother comes to the kitchen table with a container of milk, walks over and says, Marshall, here is your fucking milk. Right? How do you want your fucking eggs? You want them fucking scrambled? Huh? You want them fucking fried? Does that make sense? My father, who has no context for this story, right, is falling out of the chair, right? I mean, my mother is now screaming, if you're gonna write like that, I'm gonna fucking start to talk like that. I went up and took it out. I said, you won, you won. Kate had the largest breasts at that point.
Call them tits.
Tits, is that the word?
That was the setup, and he bit.
Yeah.
He bit.
It took all night to set it up.
Oh, yeah.
Whack.
She hit you, man. I mean,
Remember the setup with the dirty movie? He said, I got a good one. He said, you got to go along now. I said, okay. So we're all standing out in front of the high school smoking about 20 minutes before class. And he said, Jesus, am I tired? What are you so tired from? You usually go to bed kind of early. He said, well, I was out on the couch and I fell asleep. I was watching channel so-and-so. He said, I woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning and on there was strip shows. Now, back in the 50s, this was a big item. All the way strip shows. They did everything. And there was some, touch and suck and all that stuff. No shit. Yeah, it was great. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. Next morning, we're standing out there, and here comes these guys. You rotten pricks. I stayed up till 4 o'clock in the morning, watched channel so-and-so, and all I got was a goddamn test pattern.
Oh, bastard there.
king and queen of the Sigma Kappa dance. Smiles because they're happy. Jesus, I look like Stone Bobby Darin or something. Huh? Look pretty serious out there. This is my pledging cap for the fraternity I was in high school. All right. Oh, my first art review in the New York Times, February 20th, 1965. A curious combination of Goya and Beardsley influences animate these highly elaborate figure drawings by an artist who can justly be described as a virtuoso of line. And then it went downhill from there. I mean, it was like I thought, well, now I don't have to worry, right? I mean, it was funny because I didn't know who Beardsley was. I knew who Goya was, but I went and looked up Beardsley. Oh, my mother with her bent leg. God, it was bent, wasn't it? Remember the day Dad came home with a steel spike in his artery?
I guess I do remember that.
Right? Blood was spurting all over the place. He got out of the car, he came in. Mom got hysterical. Right? And then he said, all right, I'm going to have a cup of coffee, and then we're going to the hospital. And he sat at the kitchen table, and there was blood flying all over the place. He drank a cup of coffee. Do you remember?
Yeah.
It's terrifying, right? I would walk down the street and watch the blood flow through my arms. I could feel my whole pumping system going. I could feel every organ in my body. My skin became absolutely transparent. I got a phone call from my mother saying that my father had had a stroke. I was 24 years old, and my father was 47. In 1 second, half of his body was paralyzed. So when I saw him, it was totally visual. It's like you drew a pencil down the middle of his body, and the whole left side was paralyzed. And I asked my father in the hospital what it felt like when he had the stroke. And I thought he said it felt like all the blood in his body got jammed into his brain. So I came back from Jamestown, and I'm going to sleep one night, and I'm drifting in from being awake into sleep, and it suddenly, quotes, feels like all the blood in my body is rushing into my brain. So I fly out of bed. I think I'm having a stroke. My head's exploding. The next night it happened again, the next night it happened again. It went on for a year. And then my fear, of course, was that it would happen when I was awake. And then every moment of every day got to be a nightmare. I'd be in a dentist office, a drill would be in my mouth, and I thought, because I physically moved, I jerked like a sleeping dog. I then begin to will myself not to have them anymore. And anybody who's tried not to think about something knows that this is absolute insanity. The will to do something all the way through high school seemed to me very easy. I had no sympathy for anybody who couldn't do anything. Because to me, life was simple. It was like, you want to do that, you will yourself to do it, and you do it. In my family, you can be nuts, and they'll put you in the fruit cellar and take care of you. The problem is never the family. The problem is people from the outside. You don't want them to see that person. And so I'm suddenly confronted with, I suppose, some, public embarrassment. I'm in a meeting, I start to shake, I do all these things, and I'm totally lost my connection to its psychological factor and begin to think I may, in fact, have some kind of a tumor. So I go get physicals, and I go all the way up to where they want to shoot colored dye into my brain to see if there's a brain tumor. And it was like a bad acid trip. I would have this absolute clear sensation that I could see through my body and that I had no weight. It was totally psychotic episodes. So the screen paintings were an attempt to visualize the sensation I was having. In order to get the muscle tissue on the first layer, I started working with a comb, basically some kind of anatomical structure. The bottom layer was meant to be muscle tissue. The outer layer is transparent, screens a window screen. So that as you walk by these paintings, they're there and not there at the same time.
Marshall will never make you feel like he is a lunatic. Because anybody who can hide the deep-seated feelings he does have has to be adept at hiding a lot of things. And whether that's Jekyll and Hyde or just hiding, I don't know.
Marshall sees the skull beneath the skin. It's like Kali, the Indian goddess. Kali, who's the destroyer and also the creator. Marshall has this ability to render horrific detail. In fact, to give it a kind of mystical power.
So I find this medical book, which is basically a Civil War medical book, but it's got what mini balls, steel balls, did when they got into the flesh. And so I started impregnating these heads with these strange metal forms. I would paint the entire canvas in texture and stick balls in it. They don't start as heads. Putting the eyes in is the moment in the painting when they start to look at me and I look at them. Hi. My grandmother lived here for many years.
What was your grandmother's name?
Arisman, Louise Arisman.
I used Lilydale as a place to go instead of the movies. It made me a great hit in high school. I would take dates to Lilydale instead of going to the drive-in. And we'd just go up there and go to anybody's house and knock on the door and get a reading, and the readings were $3-4. So it was fun. I mean, it all seemed to be a little jerky. There were people who went into trances, and that was always funny, right? And most of my mother kept saying to me, you're treating this like it's a game, and this is serious. This is spiritualism, and your grandmother talks to spirits on the other side. And it's funny, this house looks so familiar to me.
You're Mrs. Arisman's grandson?
Yeah, and I understand you're
Oh, hell.
started this place, right? I mean, how long have you been here?
Yeah, about 67 years. I'm starting to lose track a little bit.
Are you a medium? Did you pick up any of
Retired. I've been retired for years. Oh, yeah. I think we're all born with an ability. We do not develop it.
Right.
Or we do develop it.
Right.
And we're not the 800 numbers.
You're not the psychic hotline, Betty?
Everybody is psychic.
Right.
It's no big deal.
Right.
You develop it far enough, it goes to mediumship.
Right.
That's all. But yeah, I knew.
Do you know how, we always called her Muddy, and I don't know where that nickname came from.
She started the Lilydale Spiritualist Church.
Okay.
And she lived at 1 North
Street, yeah.
She died in 1952.
52, wow.
Yeah. Everything in Lilydale is historical.
Right.
We started in 1879. The Forest Temple started in 1894. We still have Forest Temple.
Oh, okay.
And the Stump started in the 20s, and we still have Stump. I mean,
Did something specific happen at the stump?
they found a clearing in the woods with an old tree stump. And they started practicing their mediumship. 1915, it became part of our services.
Okay. I'm sitting one afternoon in Muddy's living room, and I asked her what this tube was in the corner. It looked like a cheerleader's tube, only it was made out of metal. She said, well, it's just something that has to do with the practice. And then on the way home, my father said, oh, yeah. He said, I remember when I was a kid, I would come downstairs, and Muddy and a bunch of her friends would sit in a circle and put that funnel in a circle, and I can remember that thing flying around the ceiling of the room because it had this kind of whirring sound to it. And I said, you never told me that. That's amazing. I mean, he said, well, I don't know. So my father, if he was psychic, he never said anything about it.
There was a time when Marshall would speak and you wouldn't know whether you were talking to Marshall or a facade. He can project a sense of who he wants you to think he is.
When I was a kid, Muddy said to me, "I'm tired of listening to you complain about your parents. You chose these people to enter this earth plane in a physical form that would make you totally acceptable." The minute she said that to me, I knew it was true. I had known it since I was 5. I had a black friend. And I knew he was going to have problems simply because of his physical form. And I knew I was going to pass. One of the great pleasures for me has been passing.
I think Marshall is tightly wound to suppress a sort of primitive and maybe even irrational interior. The serial killer syndrome, there's a lot of that bubbling up in Marshall, and he has taken on the placid, easygoing demeanor as a method of containing that which is down there somewhere, and when he gets a brush in his hands, it comes out. In fact, every one of his monkey paintings has the sinister aspect of the monkey. Every one of those monkeys would probably eat your arm if he got a chance.
Monkeys. Angels. Deer. Cats. Sacred animals. Power animals. These are all visionary things and intensely physical. Marshall sees that animals have power, that we're animals with a sense of spirituality.
You come in and play around for a day, and then you're doing all of this shit. It's incredible. It's a very organic. It's like a fingerprint, except bigger. And I love the line work with the gold around. I think you're going up. I'm overwhelmed. You fucking bastard. You're fucking good. You son of a bitch. You got that curse gift.
Hi, Vinny. How are you?
Good to put my parental units with me this
You're
evening.
kidding. Oh, hi, Teresa. How are you?
It's my father, Vinny.
Oh, hi, Vinny. How are you? Right?
He has decorated his little wing beautifully with your work.
Well, what do you think about him tattooing himself? When Vinny walked in with a tattoo, I was worried about you too, right?
One of the main reasons why I got this piece tattooed on me is because, first off, I absolutely fell in love with it. I just had to have it. I wanted actually to absorb it, and I figured the only way to do that was get a tattoo. I was 17 years old when a friend of mine would show me a cover of Time magazine. It was a cover that Marshall had done. It was an article regarding violence in America. Upon seeing that magazine, I made a conscious decision that I would make a collection of Marshall's paintings. It just spoke to me on I guess it's a subconscious level, and I just needed to be part of Marshall's art world. I had never collected art prior to this, and I had never even considered it. Lived with my folks for a while, and one of the reasons for getting this particular apartment was because of its layout, and it would afford me the ability to display most of Marshall's paintings that I own. A friend of mine had convinced me that I was a collector of Marshall's work of some significance. So I said, well, most significant collectors usually have their portrait done. So I called Marshall and asked him if he would do it. He kind of laughed at the idea, but thought it was a great idea. For work, I do have a camera, and I'm a damage appraiser, so I'm always able to take photographs. So as I was driving the car, I just pulled the camera back and took a couple of shots of myself while I was driving, and I gave them to Marshall. I said, Marshall, if you could use these, rather than me sitting, and he said, yeah, this would work perfectly. So as you can see, the image, it's sort of up from underneath as I held the camera out this way and pointed it up at my face from underneath. That's why you get that unusual angle.
Every gallery I've had has said to me, the first thing you got to do is stop illustrating. I mean, it's ruining your fine art career. People come into the gallery and say, oh, I knew he was an illustrator, but I didn't know he painted any pictures. The truth is, I like illustration. I think my perversity is that I try to get whatever article is given me to illustrate my picture. I still get phone calls for this period of work that I did.
His work has that kind of violent psychological drama that I associate with Hannibal Lecter.
Who's better to illustrate Hannibal, this Hannibal the Cannibal, than Marshall Arisman? He did a piece for Time magazine that week.
It's actually the Times.
Oh, it was the Times? Okay.
Silence of the Lambs Part 2.
He later called me back the next day, I believe, and he said that, man, that this one in particular, it just was too much for them to handle. And I said, why don't you describe the piece for me?
Hannibal Lecter standing there looking at a piece of meat that we all knew was human, that looked like a beefsteak, was of some amusement, and maybe the essence of what this was all about.
It was not very tasty. It was, and I'm a vegetarian.
I thought, oh my God, I want that piece. I say, we'll publish it.
I think my response to him was, that's not very graphic. I need a graphic cover. That's usually my line when I don't like something.
I ran inside this issue of Hillary. And here it is. The piece is called Brain Food, which is very funny.
I mediate between the artist's own creative process and the needs of my publication.
I think this is one of his strongest pieces, compositionally. And that's Hannibal.
They go to school for 9 years.
Yes, this way.
So students live here as well, right? They're second year in high school.
Yeah.
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 No, it's very good training. They draw very well. So they start with still life?
Yeah. They draw in still life. Yeah.
And then they go to the figure.
在美术馆啊，今天很著名的，我知道。He said he know you, very famous.
No, no.
著名的一个，很高兴见到你。
Oh, that's nice.
I think this is a third-year student.
Right. You must be very proud of it. See, it's interesting for me because we are quite good at conceptual work, right, in America, but we miss this foundation you have.
Well, we missed something too. Yeah. So what do you teach for the college level students?
Just goes on for a while. I really had to measure my progress in feet per day.
So you're just starting at one end and then just letting it work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you started initially, were you thinking of this panel by panel and then this thing just started running? I mean,
You know, it didn't take very long to get frustrated with that. I had no idea I was going to start doing all of this with the waves and the bottles and their scrimshaw in the bottles and...
I mean, obviously everybody is saying Chinese to you, right? I mean,
Yeah. And I've spent a lot of time up at the Met looking at the scrolls there. I'm exhausted by it, and there's a real roughness to it just because I'm trying to fill up space. I'm trying to get as many pages, many feet in.
But, you know, it's funny. I can almost feel you loosening up as you go. This last black and white really just feels like you just was doing it. I mean, I have a sense that there's an instinctual sense of time in it. I mean, there are musical passages in it, without question. I mean, there are blanks, there are spaces, there are runs, there are complications, there are choruses, right? I mean,
I found kind of some territory that I know I'm in. I mean, there's obviously a nautical thing, and there's a monastic thing, and there's...
Right. Last year, spending a week in a monastery, and to do your drawings on location. I mean, I think you're already beginning to get commercial work that's happening with.
Right.
And I think the advantage of that is to not duplicate that in your own work where you don't have to.
Yeah.
Because they are, in fact, stories. They're just stories we don't know yet.
The way of you seeing things is very different.
Yeah, well, I think that's the issue, right? I mean, that's what's interesting to me is in America, I am very traditional artist.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
now I have great pleasure in introducing the artist himself, Mr. Arisman.
It is a great honor for me personally to be here and to have my artwork exhibited in this incredible museum. To be part of the permanent collection is a special honor.
we cut it one time? Okay.
He's the most famous cartoonist in China.
Really? Yeah.
廖冰兄。
他是美国的。旁边来滚的。
These are drawn with a roller,
这个是旁边的。
not with a brush.
滚动键。右的呢就是旁边的这样子，这个抽的呢就是
Very interesting. The monkey we have, the exhibition we saw this morning. You do have the skills, I think, and the idea too. It's pretty good. Your skill is pretty good. Very strong when we see this. It's very strong. Gives I don't know how to say. Very impressive.
My grandmother saw auras. The energy that we all emanate is visible around you and around everything, around chairs, around buildings, and whatever. I see auras. I don't want to get esoteric on you. There are probably some people in here who see auras. So you all have color around you. You're all pumping energy. It's a physical thing. It's not metaphysical. It's not mystical. It won't change your life, but I'll tell you how to do it. Find a room that's not well lit. Put your hand up against a white surface and make a dot on this side and one on this side. In this dot, you look with this eye, and with this dot, you look with the other eye. So you're looking like this. You with me? Okay. If you look at your hand, you'll get lost in it. My hand's dirty, whatever, I need a... So you unfocus on the object, you will begin to see a white light around. It won't be stagnant, it'll move. You'll see a white light moving around your hand. That's an aura. That's all it is. And if you practice, you'll begin to see color. My grandmother was really good at this. She could see discoloration where there was pain. For many years, until I began to see the aura, I secretly would try to paint auras, but I didn't want to certainly make it public. I have to ease into it in a funny way, but I do it knowing that most of the time the feedback I'm going to get on this stuff is much more skewered. I keep stepping in and stepping out and hearing echoes of my grandmother coming back.
But that's Louise Arisman.
Yeah. There was a baby born in Lilydale that died, and its image appeared on a wall. It impressed me as a kid because
they did. Yeah, this is what they did. And different phases of physical mediumship cannot be done on demand.
Right.
And the public demanded it, so they faked it.
Okay. It's funny. Remember I was telling my father, that's the funnel that was in my grandmother's house. Yeah. It's called a trumpet.
Trumpet could be faked, but you had good ones.
Right.
Materializations, you had good ones.
Right. You couldn't produce
And
on
that
demand.
you can't do
right?
on demand.
Okay.
Slate writing you could, or those paintings by precipitation, of course, the only
What
one.
does painting by precipitation
Okay.
mean, Joyce?
Over here is, you would bring your canvas
Right.
to the medium. They would put it on an easel. They would put a pot of paint underneath it, put a cover over it, set on either side, go into a trance, and anywhere from a half hour to 3 hours, a painting would appear on that.
That's wild.
And Azar was done in an hour and a half, and yet it's 40 by 60. And it was done in pure daylight in front of people. But what it is, now we took them out, we had them sent out to be analyzed,
Right.
and it came back, they don't know what it is, it's not a photograph, it's not paint, but it's like butterfly pollen. The medium never
This
held,
is getting good, Joyce.
medium never held a paintbrush.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and the only ones that ever did it was Campbell Brothers and Bang Sisters, and they traveled all over the world doing it. They would come in and they want a painting of my loved one in spirit,
Right.
my Uncle Joe,
Right.
Louise Arisman,
Right.
if you wish.
Right.
When they came out of the seance, a picture was on that canvas.
I'm going to try it, Joyce.
Try it.
The idea of doing it without doing it, right? This is wonderful. Right? I'm going to try it. Take a canvas, cover it, sit and think about it. And then there it'll be. When I was painting all of this terror, right, these lines that I kept putting into my work were aura lines to me. They weren't real auras because I didn't want to paint it the way they really look, but it was like a little game that I kept throwing into my work. It wasn't style driven. I mean, it was like a secret. Color's never meant much to me, except for its value. I see everything in essence in black and white. It was only in painting the aura light that color began to make sense to me. The first aura I saw was on a man named Krishnamurti, who was an Indian philosopher and he did a lecture at Carnegie Hall. There was a book written by Krishnamurti on our bookshelf, and it had this amazing impact on me. I would sense it, then lose it, read it again, sense it, so that when he showed up at Carnegie Hall, I think I was probably not in a very good psychological state, number one, but number two, I was probably more attentive than I've ever been. I wanted to hear this man speak, and I was totally focused. I sat in the audience, and in the middle of him talking, I began to see the only gold aura I've ever seen, and it went away. Then I concentrated on what he was saying again, and then it came back, and I went through this process for about 25 minutes until I finally got rid of enough fear to sit there and watch it. And it was amazing. He sat on this little chair in the middle of this huge stage, and so the aura went out about 6 feet on either side. It was pure gold, and then a pair of wings began to grow out of his back. It freaked me out. I mean, I didn't dare tell my wife. I kept thinking I was having a breakdown of some kind, and the wings were not made out of feathers. They were made out of this bronze, shimmering metal that looked absolutely like it weighed 1,000,000 pounds. He was this big, and the wings were this big, and they must have gone up 80 feet. These wings completely filled the stage of Carnegie Hall. the first thing that hit me was that all those paintings with those auras around them weren't made up, that somebody in fact had once seen them, that auras were in fact physical energy.
In icons, it's the divine presence, it's divinity.
The gold aura, it's always gold, right?
Well, it's a symbol, but I don't know.
I mean, what's interesting to me, just in terms of auras, is that the aura itself moves all around the body. Right? It doesn't stay just in the head.
In icons, it's symbolic content. This thing is total symbolic language. You start off, the first layer is chaos. Then the first major step is to put line in, and just at that point it becomes form, and then you start pulling the light from the piece. Essentially bring the light up.
This is ground level, and as you begin to add light to it, in essence, you're pulling it into enlightenment, I suppose. That's the aim. It's rarely achieved.
The more you're engaged in the dialogue with the image you're working with, actually you can kind of move it onto the truth of that through you
into the icon. It's why I paint. It has nothing to do with the painting. It's the time and looking for the time in the process of doing the painting when I'm in fact not me doing anything.
Yeah.
I mean, in essence, I'm paint itself, or I am whatever it is itself. I mean, those are amazing moments.
That's why I like your painting of the cat, for instance, okay?
Right.
The cat is stepping through that moment of kind of something's happening.
It's funny, I mean, looking at Charlie's icon, I mean, he gessos and sands those things for days. It would make me nuts. He's very involved in areas I'm not involved in, very Christian Protestant background. But we share this peculiar conversation.
Then you put the clay on, a couple layers of clay, and then you sand it and burnish it and sand it and burnish it, and you get it as smooth as you possibly can. And then you stick the gold down, serious gold leaf, real stuff. You've worked with it. Gold leaf. I mean,
I know.
I'm kind of klutzy, and I move around and I sneeze, and $20 worth of gold leaf goes across it. The thinking is you breathe onto the clay. The moisture in your breath is enough to loosen the glue in the clay, and then you stick the gold in. So you have God breathing life into the clay. The gold that's on top of the clay shows absolutely every imperfection of the clay.
Right.
And the clay is us. That's us.
I'm beginning to move my hand from the middle of her back to this enormous breast. All takes about 20 minutes, right? I keep waiting.
Very subtle.
You're waiting for the slap. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Or the arm clay.
Or the old,
you remember the arm clay?
It's time for a cigarette.
So I'm moving around. Finally, on the breast, she looks down and she gets terrified and says, "Oh my God, I had no idea your hand was there." I'm really embarrassed. I was trying to explain to you that I had some heart problems. She said, "Actually, I had a breast removed."
Oh, jeez. You're making this up again, Arisman. You think I'm going to buy this shit again? You're just making it all up.
Go ahead.
I mean, and that I don't have a breast there, right? And what your hand is on a pad.
Oh, this is
Yeah.
That's how you got so far. You didn't know it, huh? Shit.
I mean,
Did you write a story about that?
I drove home and I thought, I'm such a low-class
That's the biggest falsie you ever touched.
You could throw me in a room with a padded bra, and I'd be
minutes to get over.
Have you become the greatest storyteller in New York, too?
What is the name of this documentary? Assholes After 60,
There seem to be many spirit guides in the form of Indians.
It's because this is their country,
right?
And they want the best for it, so they're trying to help heal things.
Okay.
This one, I did riding around in the car. This one, she's Princess Nutska.
So could you do a spirit portrait of a guide for me?
I'm asking the Great Spirit to bless this endeavor and bless my spirit guides, and may all be done to your honor and glory. And you have, I'm seeing a Native American Indian with you. I'm amazed at his energy. He's got rather a sharp nose, and he's sporting a bunch of feathers, you know.
I know this all sounds wacky as hell. I started doing these paintings. At one point, I started to realize, I looked at them, I thought, this is very strange. They're looking like American Indian stuff to me.
I try to work downwards so that I don't keep smudging what I've already done. He's pretty intelligent because he likes to read books, say nature books.
I keep looking for series. I keep looking to find an obsession. And so I started reading more about the Indian relationship to deer, and thought about my brother's relationship to deer, and somewhere turned up a piece of information that the antler of the deer protected the head. People began to call me, 2 or 3 people called me in the same week and said, there's a book I think you'd really like. It's called Black Elk Speaks. It's about a Sioux Indian. And I began to feel that there was this curious relationship, that I was in some way had touched a ritual. Came in here one day and I felt a presence of an American Indian. It wasn't about a features, I just sensed an individual presence that was Indian. And so one afternoon I decided that I would put a hyena, which is totally outside the realm of the animal of the Indian, into a painting surrounded by antlers. And in the middle of the painting, one of the rags I was working on with the painting burst into flames. And I sat here for a day, actually, able to pick up any rag and throw it into the air and it would burst into flames. And I thought, well, you know, if I can do this tomorrow, I've got a show I can put on the road. I mean, I can go to Las Vegas with this thing. I could probably quit painting. And so I called a friend who is a psychic, and I'm sitting there, and she said, this is very odd. She said, you know, you are turning into an American Indian before my eyes. You have feathers on, you have a deerskin jacket on. What's going on?
What did you say? You said it looks like his aura.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's going to be a feather.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I never thought about that. That the headdress was, in essence, an aura form, wasn't it?
Oh, definitely.
I sat in my studio at the table, right, with a roll of paper towels, right, and just wadded them up, right, threw them out in the air, right, and they burst into flames, right. Happened all day.
I don't think I have ever done an Indian that looks as fierce as this one.
I could hear, like, you asshole. It's just like, we didn't have hyenas. What are you doing? Now I know what he looks like. I loved it when she measured, right? Because when she said, I always start at the top of the head to make a drawing, I thought she was going to give me some kind of profound reason, right? The energy center goes through the temple or something. And she said, so I won't smudge the charcoal as I work down. I think we have to take another look at Black Elk. I thought he went away. But Patricia tells me he's back and never left. think it's good you don't have any mounted heads in your living room.
No, I didn't. Never cared about that.
So what are you going to do with his head?
Oh, I figured I'll
Put it in the dumpster? Really? They won't take that, will they? The food markets in China, there's no refrigeration, and so the whole market looks like this. Oh. Suddenly did this flash on China. You know what was scary about that market? You remember the smell in the house after Mom died?
Yeah.
You remember that smell? Yeah. That's what it smelled like in the market. It was really scary.
Really, yeah.
I mean, I don't know what that smell was, but it,
Well,
it was death or something. But it was Are we going to smell like that?
yeah. I respect you.
It's getting depressing.
Yeah, I know.
You going to get there before me?
I would
2 years
imagine
old.
the rate I'm going. Pretty fast life.
I think art is rooted in the mysteries. What Marshall's trying to do is get back to the notion of, does anybody care about the spiritual aspect anymore in terms of art?
A shaman is an enchanter. Shamanstvo is enchantment. It's a Russian word, but the word is from Russia. It's from Siberia. But in Russian, a shaman is a priest. He's a doctor. He's someone you would drink ayahuasca in the Ecuadorian rainforest and have hallucinations. Marshall is, I see him as definitely an enchanter, a shaman.
Oh, well, if you live, your time will come. I say, if you live, your time will come. So, child, don't mess with that cotton sack. It's gonna scratch your knees and bend your back. And if
I'm very aware that I'm forming 2 groups here. I mean, there are people who come in who really don't want to go to these cats or monkeys or anything else. They want to go to the other stuff.
Whether it's pure evil that he's depicting or this veiled evil or mischievousness, is that he's always there laughing in that sly laugh of his.
I think what people are left with is simply, oh, he sees auras, right? So now what's happening to me is everybody I meet, right, says, what's my aura? What's my aura? What's my aura? Well, the truth is, I don't just walk on a bright day, I can't see an aura, right? I mean, this isn't like, I have to work a little to do it, but that's coming. And more of that will come. I mean, I'm beginning to get that into place finally. Maybe this is totally an age phenomenon. Maybe this is some internal clock telling me something about something.
He knows something. I mean, I'm convinced Marshall knows what the afterlife is. He just won't tell anybody because he's so fucking perverse. And if he told people, we'd feel better. He knows, and he won't tell. And maybe he doesn't even know he knows.
We all want to think there's a secret. I want to think Goya and Velázquez had a trick. If he didn't have a trick, he didn't have any more than I do. That somewhere Goya had a magic brush, and if I had that brush, don't we all want to think there's a trick? There was an illustrator named Bob Peak, and he did a lot of line work, and I didn't like his work very much, but I had a student that loved him, and every week said to me, how does he do it? How does he get that quality in his line? And I got so tired of him asking me, I said to him one day, I said, you've never met Bob Peak, right? He said, no. And I said, well, I got to tell you something, because you will meet him one day. I said, he has a wooden hand. And during the war, he reached out for a grenade, he blew his hand off. And I said, you're too young to remember this, but during the Second World War, they didn't have all those fancy plastic things that look real. I said, so Bob Peake carved his own hand, all right? And then he painted it so realistically that you're not going to believe it, okay? So now I got him now. He's making mental notes, right? You know, one day I'll meet him, one day whatever. So I said, okay, you've been asking me how he gets this line, I'm going to tell you the secret. Bob Peake has a wooden hand. He drilled holes in it, right? The holes fit different pencils, right? I said, have you ever noticed that when you draw, you got to hold a pencil in your finger? You get tight, your back gets tight, you tend to tense up a little. Yeah, I get these backaches. Right, that's it, okay. Bob Peake inserts the pencil this way and draws like this. That's how he got that line. He bought it, his soul bought it. Does that make sense? Because I had told him the trick. Okay, so I'm not kidding you. For 2 years, I got calls from art directors saying some idiot was just in my office arguing with me, telling me that you told him that Bob Peake's got a wooden hand and that he draws like this. And these are coyote eyes. I think they're crystal eyes that I buy from taxidermists. I think it upsets him that I don't use these eyes for the correct animal. But they're nice. They're antique. They're made out of crystal, and they have a nice luminosity to them. God, he lives.
Thank you.